The Forbidden Zone. The U.S. Valkyrie moved through the vast darkness of space, its steel hull reflecting the dim glow of distant stars. It was a massive warship, one of humanity's most advanced, built for battles that no other race could survive. Inside, the crew worked in silence, their eyes fixed on their monitors. They all knew where they were heading. They were entering the Forbidden Zone, a part of the galaxy ruled by the Crimson and Nova judges, the most feared enforcers of intergalactic law. No human had ever dared to come here. No one who entered had ever returned. Yet, the Valkyrie moved forward. On the bridge, Admiral Kane stood with his hands behind his back, his face calm but focused. He had been in battles before, but this was different. This was a challenge, a test of power. The judges had ruled over weaker species for too long. Humanity would not be one of them. A warning flashed on the main screen. Incoming transmission. A deep, cold voice filled the room. Human vessel, this is Judge Caros of the Crimson Authority. You have entered restricted space. Turn back now, or face destruction. The crew glanced at each other. Some felt fear, others excitement. But Kane only smiled. Hold position, he ordered. The transmission continued. This is your final warning. Surrender your ship and prepare for boarding. Kane shook his head. They think we're weak. Lieutenant Rook, scan the area, Kane said. The young officer tapped on the console. His screen flickered for a moment before he frowned. Sir, we are not alone. A moment later, space came alive with enemy ships. From the darkness, dozens of warships decloaked, surrounding the Valkyrie from all sides. They were sleek, black, and shaped like daggers, their weapons already locked on target. The bridge filled with tension. Sir, we are completely surrounded, Rook said. The voice of Judge Caros returned, colder than before. Foolish humans. Did you really think you could enter our domain unnoticed? Admiral Kane sighed. He stepped forward and pressed a button on the control panel. His voice was calm but firm. Judge Caros, I appreciate the welcome party, but you made one mistake. Silence. Then the judge spoke. And what mistake is that, human? Kane smiled. You should have fired first. With a single motion, he slammed his fist on the command console. Fire EV or Thithing. The Valkyrie came to life. Its massive guns roared, lighting up the darkness with streams of plasma fire. Missiles streaked through the void, slamming into enemy ships. The judges were caught off guard. They had expected fear, not aggression. Several enemy ships exploded instantly, torn apart by the Valkyrie's weapons. But the judges were not weak. The remaining ships quickly returned fire. The Valkyrie shook violently as red energy beams struck its hull. Shields at 70%. A crew member shouted. Kane didn't flinch. Redirect power to the forward shields, he ordered. Keep firing. The warship pushed forward, weaving between enemy fire. The crew worked fast, launching counterattacks, using the ship's superior technology to outmaneuver the judges. One by one, enemy ships fell apart. But then, something changed. A massive dreadnought emerged from the darkness. It was 5 times the size of the Valkyrie, its hull covered in glowing red symbols. The main screen zoomed in on the enemy flagship. Rook's voice was almost a whisper. That's the Crimson Executor, one of the judge's strongest warships. The bridge went silent. Judge Caros returned, his voice filled with anger. Enough games, human. You will burn for this. The Executor's weapons charged up, glowing bright red. If those cannons fired, the Valkyrie wouldn't stand a chance. Kane took a deep breath. He had known this would happen. He had planned for this. He turned to his crew. Prepare the Valkyrie Gambit, he said. The crew froze. It was a high-risk maneuver, something Kane had never tested in real combat. But there was no other way. The Crimson Executor locked on target. The Valkyrie raced forward. Kane clenched his fists. This was it. The battle had begun, but it was far from over. The U.S. Valkyrie pushed forward, weaving through the wreckage of destroyed enemy ships. Fires burned in the vacuum of space, flickering orange against the endless darkness. The Crimson and Nova judges had underestimated them, but now they were preparing their full might. Inside the Valkyrie's bridge, Admiral Kane stood tall, his eyes locked on the massive Crimson Executor dreadnought. It was a war machine unlike anything humanity had ever faced, twice the size of the Valkyrie, its hull layered with plasma shields and reactive armor. Its cannons were charging up, preparing to unleash devastation. "Status?" Kane asked, his voice calm. "Shields at 54% and dropping fast." Rook shouted, "That last hit fried our portside plating. We can't take another direct hit like that." The ship shuddered violently as another energy beam struck their rear engines. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge. The enemy wasn't just firing randomly anymore. They had adjusted. They had learned. A new transmission came through, the voice of Judge Karos now laced with cold fury. "You are nothing but an insect beneath our boots, human. You have fought well, but this game is over." A second later, the Executor's main cannon fired. A massive beam of red energy tore through space, heading straight for the Valkyrie. The crew braced for impact. There was no time to escape. But then, the Valkyrie vanished. The energy beam roared past, missing its target entirely. Judge Karos blinked in confusion. His sensors scanned the battlefield. The human warship was gone. Then, his screens flickered. The Valkyrie reappeared behind the Executor, its massive guns already aimed. "You should have fired faster," Kane said. The Valkyrie gambit had worked. Using a combination of experimental cloaking and short-range teleportation, the warship had faked its own destruction, tricking the enemy into exposing their blind spot. Now, the Executor was vulnerable. "Fire EVEY thing," Kane roared. The Valkyrie's weapons erupted in a storm of plasma and railgun rounds. Missiles streaked toward the Executor, slamming into its engines and hull. The massive dreadnought lurched forward, its shields struggling to hold. The bridge crew erupted in cheers as explosions rippled across the enemy flagship. But Kane wasn't celebrating yet. "Scan the Executor's core," he ordered. Rook's face turned pale as the data came in. "Sir, their power levels are rising. They're overloading their reactor." Kane's jaw tightened. "They're turning their ship into a bomb." The Executor was already falling apart, but now it was a ticking time bomb, and they were right in the blast zone. "Full speed ahead," Kane shouted. "Get us clear, now." The Valkyrie's engines roared as it raced away. The crew worked frantically, rerouting power to the thrusters. The Executor continued to glow brighter, its core on the verge of collapse. Then, in one final moment, the Crimson Executor exploded. A massive shockwave ripped through space, tearing apart the remaining enemy ships. The Valkyrie barely escaped the blast radius, the force of the explosion pushing them forward like a tidal wave. Inside the bridge, everyone held their breath. The monitors flickered, the ship groaned, but they were alive. Then, static. A new transmission. The image of a figure in golden armor appeared on the screen. His face was hidden behind a mask, his presence radiating power. This was the Nova Judge. Unlike Karos, he did not speak with rage. His voice was calm, cold, calculated. "You have slain my brother. You have defied the law of the galaxy. Do you think this is a victory, Admiral Kane?" "No," Kane replied, his voice unwavering. "This is just the beginning." The Nova Judge tilted his head. "Indeed. Now, the true hunt begins." The transmission cut out. The bridge fell silent. The battle was over, but something far worse was coming. They were no longer just an enemy. They were now the most wanted fugitives in the galaxy, and the hunt had just begun. The Valkyrie drifted through the wreckage of battle, its hull scarred, its systems barely holding together. The once mighty Crimson Executor was now nothing more than floating debris, a burning graveyard of metal and fire. The battle was over. But the war had just begun. Inside the Valkyrie's dimly lit bridge, Admiral Kane stood in silence, staring at the last transmission from the Nova Judge. The golden figure had spoken with chilling calm, his words more dangerous than any weapon. Now, the true hunt begins. The meaning was clear. The Valkyrie was no longer just a rogue warship. It was now the galaxy's most wanted target. Kane exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening into a fist. Status report. Lieutenant Rook wiped sweat from his brow, his hands flying over the control panel. Hull integrity at 42%. Shields are struggling to recharge. We've lost one of our main thrusters. And he hesitated, looking at Kane with a grim expression. Kane's voice was firm. And what? Rook swallowed. Sir, there's a tracker on us. The air on the bridge went still. Commander Sloan, the Valkyrie's second-in-command, stepped forward. A tracker? From where? Rook zoomed in on the ship's external scan, highlighting a small blinking beacon attached to the rear hull. It must have been planted during the battle. That's why they let us go. They wanted us to run. Kane clenched his jaw. The Nova Judge wasn't just hunting them. He was already watching. Can we remove it? Kane asked. Rook shook his head. Not without triggering a failsafe. If we try to disable it, the signal will immediately alert every Crimson and Nova fleet in the sector. Sloan muttered a curse under her breath. So what's the plan? Keep running until they catch us. Kane's mind worked fast. The Valkyrie was a powerful ship, but it couldn't outrun the entire galaxy. They needed to disappear. They needed to go where no one could follow. A plan formed in his mind. A reckless, desperate plan. But it was the only way. Kane turned to his navigation officer. Set a course for the Abyss Rift. The crew froze. Sloan's eyes widened. Sir, you can't be serious. The Abyss Rift. Rook whispered. That place is suicide. The Abyss Rift was a section of uncharted space, a place where ships vanish without a trace. It was filled with black holes, gravitational storms, and anomalies that could tear apart even the strongest vessels. No sane captain would ever enter it, which was exactly why Kane chose it. If we go there, no one will follow, Kane said. Not even the judges. The crew hesitated, but they all knew the truth. If they stayed in normal space, they would be hunted down and destroyed. Slowly, Sloan nodded. All right, but if we die, I'm haunting you. Kane smirked. Noted. The Valkyrie's engines flared, and the ship turned toward the darkest region of space. Then, alarms blared. Sir, multiple enemy signals approaching fast. Rook shouted. Kane snapped his head to the screen. A massive fleet of Crimson warships had appeared behind them, at least 50 ships, closing in fast. The Nova Judge had played his hand. He hadn't just tracked them, he had been waiting for them to make a move. Brace for impact, Kane yelled. The first wave of enemy fire slammed into the Valkyrie, shaking the entire ship. Sparks flew as the shields struggled to hold. The crew gritted their teeth as the warship lurched under the assault. Kane's mind raced. They couldn't fight this many enemies. They couldn't escape without jumping straight into the Abyss Rift. There was no choice. Activate the rift jump, Kane commanded. But sir, do it. The engines roared to life, the ship shaking as energy built up. The Valkyrie's jump drive was not designed for this kind of jump. No ship was. The enemy fleet continued firing, but it was too late. With a blinding flash of blue light, the Valkyrie vanished into the Abyss Rift. And then, only silence remained. The Crimson warships came to a halt. Inside the command ship, the Nova Judge stared at the empty void where the Valkyrie had been. He remained still, unreadable. Then, in a slow, measured voice, he spoke. Run, little humans. Run into the darkness. I will be waiting. The U.S. Valkyrie tore through space, leaving behind the chaos of battle and plunging into the unknown depths of the abyss rift. The stars outside blurred into long, twisted streaks of blue and black, warping unnaturally as the ship's jump drive forced its way through unstable space. Inside the bridge, red warning lights flickered as alarms blared. The ship wasn't built for this kind of jump, and it was showing. Jump drive overheating. Rook shouted over the chaos. Structural integrity is dropping. If we stay in this rift too long, we'll be torn apart. The ship lurched violently, metal groaning under the pressure. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits. The abyss was pulling them deeper, like an invisible hand dragging them into the unknown. Admiral Kane gritted his teeth. How much farther? Sloan checked the navigational readout. Impossible to tell, sir. This place, nothing makes sense. We're picking up gravitational pockets that shouldn't exist. Energy readings off the charts. It's like this place is. She hesitated. Like what? Kane pressed. She exhaled. Like it's alive. For a moment, no one spoke. And then, the ship dropped out of the rift. The Valkyrie lurched forward violently, the sudden stop throwing crew members against their harnesses. The alarms quieted, but the eerie silence that followed was almost worse. Everyone looked to the main view screen. The sight outside stole their breath away. They were no longer in normal space. Before them stretched a twisting expanse of shattered planets, broken moons, and ancient wreckage floating in an eerie blue void. Strange, glowing clouds drifted through space like ghosts. Some of the wreckage was human, old warships from battles that no history book had ever recorded. Others were alien, designed so foreign they looked like they had been built by things that had never even heard of physics. This, Rook whispered, scanning his console. Sir, this place doesn't exist on any map. Kane studied the twisted graveyard of ships. It exists now. But something felt wrong. Sloan was already on it. Sir, we're not alone. Kane turned to her. Crimson ships. She shook her head, her face pale. No, something else. A new warning flared across the screens. Unidentified energy signatures. Multiple sources. The Valkyrie's sensors struggled to lock onto them. Every time they focused, the readings shifted, as if the very space around them was warping. And then the first shape moved. Out of the swirling fog, a massive shadow detached itself from the wreckage. It was ancient, far older than anything they had ever seen. Its surface was covered in markings, deep grooves in its metallic hull that glowed with a faint, sickly green light. Then, another, and another. More and more massive vessels emerged from the depths, their hulls scarred by ages of war. But they weren't wrecks. They were waking up. Kane's gut twisted. They had just stumbled into something they were never meant to find. A deep, thrumming sound echoed through the ship. Not a message. Not words. A presence. Something was here, and now it knew they were too. The lights on the bridge flickered. Then, in a slow, terrible moment, one of the massive ships turned toward them. It was impossible. There was no crew, no signals of life, and yet it was moving with purpose. And then the first beam of energy lanced toward the Valkyrie. Evasive maneuvers. Kane barked. The ship barely dodged in time as the attack cut through the space where they had been. The beam didn't explode. It simply erased everything in its path. Sir, these things are hostile, Rook yelled. Kane had already figured that out. Power weapons. Return fire. The Valkyrie's guns roared, plasma rounds streaking toward the nearest ancient ship. They struck the hull, but did nothing. The ship absorbed the energy, the glowing runes on its body burning brighter. Sloane's face paled. Sir, I don't think we can fight these things. Kane's mind raced. He had fought Crimson judges, entire fleets of enemies, even impossible odds before. But this was something else. Something not meant for mortals to face. A second ship turned toward them. Then a third. More of those terrible energy beams charged up. Kane made a split-second decision. We need to get out of here. Now. But sir, the jump drive is still recharging. Find another way. Rook, scan for anything, anywhere we can run. Rook's hands flew over the console. For a few heartbeats, there was nothing. No hope. Then, sir, there's a spatial anomaly nearby. A rift, different from the one we entered through. It's unstable, but Kane didn't hesitate. Set a course. Full speed. The ship lurched forward, engines pushing past their limits. The ancient ships moved in pursuit, their beams cutting through space, missing the Valkyrie by inches. The entire ship shook as gravitational forces tried to pull them back. The rift loomed ahead, swirling, unstable, pulsing with unknown energy. It was a gamble. It was suicide. But staying meant death. Brace for impact. The Valkyrie plunged into the rift. For a moment, everything went dark. Then the ship exploded out the other side, tumbling through normal space, alarms blaring. They were out. Silence filled the bridge. Everyone was still breathing. Kane looked back at the view screen. The rift was already collapsing behind them, sealing away the nightmare they had just escaped. For now, Sloane let out a breath. What the hell was that? No one had an answer. Then a new alarm sounded. Sir, Rook's voice was shaky. I'm picking up a transmission. Kane frowned. From who? Rook hesitated. Then he patched it through. A familiar voice echoed across the bridge. You just walked into hell, Admiral Kane. The screen flickered to life. And there, staring back at them, was the Nova Judge. Smiling, the bridge of the U.S. Valkyrie was deathly silent. The crew stood frozen, staring at the view screen where the Nova Judge's face loomed, his golden mask reflecting the dim glow of the ship's flickering lights. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of a predator who had just cornered his prey. You just walked into hell, Admiral Kane. Kane narrowed his eyes, his fingers tightening into fists. He wasn't one to be easily rattled, but something about the Nova Judge's tone sent a chill through his spine. You knew about this place, Kane said. The judge tilted his head slightly, as if amused. Of course, the Abyss Rift is not unknown to us. It is simply avoided. Behind Kane, Sloane shifted uneasily. If it's so dangerous, why the hell are you here? The Nova Judge let out a slow, measured breath. To watch you die. Before Kane could respond, every console on the Valkyrie flickered violently. The lights dimmed, then pulsed with a deep red hue. Warning sirens wailed through the ship as systems began to fail one by one. Rook's voice was tight with panic. Sir, something is overriding our controls. Engines are locked. Shields are down. Static ripped through the comms. Then a second voice cut through the chaos. It wasn't the Nova Judge. It wasn't anything human. Intruders. Trespassers. You do not belong. The words didn't come through the speakers. They pulsed inside their heads like 1,000 voices speaking at once. A presence, vast and unknowable, pressed down on them. Kane clenched his jaw. Who are we talking to? The voice rippled through the air. We are what remains. The last echoes of the forgotten war. The view screen shifted. The image of the Nova Judge disappeared, replaced by a swirling abyss of black and green, endless and hungry. From its depths, something moved. A massive structure drifted toward them, covered in twisted spires and pulsating light. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a station. It was something else entirely. Something alive. Sloane's breath hitched. Sir, I think we just found out what built those ships back there. Kane barely heard her. His focus was locked on the thing approaching them. The way it moved, slow, deliberate, as if it had all the time in the universe to decide what to do with them. Then, you carry a corruption. Kane's pulse quickened. What the hell does that mean? The presence in their minds shifted. as if studying them. Your enemy is marked. The Golden One. The judges. They are tainted with the blood of the betrayers. The Nova judge's face reappeared on the view screen, his expression unreadable. You speak of things that no longer matter. The voice roared through their skulls. They matter more than you know. The ship shook violently, as if an invisible force had gripped it from all sides. Warning lights flashed, and the artificial gravity flickered, causing some crew members to stumble. Kane steadied himself. Enough. If you want us dead, just do it already. The presence seemed to hesitate. Then, no, you are different. The ship stopped shaking. The energy fluctuations ceased. The bridge was left in eerie silence. The Nova judge spoke again, his voice tight. You will regret sparing them. The presence ignored him. Instead, its voice focused on Kane. Prove yourself, human. The betrayers still exist. They hide behind law, behind power. They twist the stars to their will. You have defied them. That is why you are here. Kane's mind was racing. This thing, whatever it was, hated the judges. It saw them as something far worse than a simple governing power. Why? Kane asked. What did they do? The presence pulsed again, like a distant heartbeat. The betrayers were once like you. Weak, mortal. They were given a gift, a power beyond their kind. And they used it to rule. The Nova judge finally moved. His golden mask tilted downward slightly. Enough. A low rumble shook the ship again, but this time it wasn't an attack. It was laughter. You cannot silence the truth, Golden One. The presence began to fade, retreating into the darkness of the rift. But before it left, its voice echoed one final time. The war never ended. It only forgot itself. Your fight is not over, Admiral Kane. It is only beginning. And then, silence. The ship's systems snapped back online. The alarms stopped. The gravity stabilized. The eerie glow outside the ship dimmed, leaving only the drifting wreckage behind. The Nova judge remained on the screen, but this time, his calm demeanor was gone. For the first time, Kane saw something beneath the mask, something that looked like fear. You do not understand what you have awakened, Admiral. Kane exhaled, his mind still spinning from what had just happened. I think I do. The Nova judge stared at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, his transmission cut out. Rook let out a shaky breath. So, what now? Kane looked out at the darkness of the abyss rift, where something ancient had just spoken to him, given him a warning, a challenge. He straightened. Now, his eyes hardened. Now we find out what the judges have been hiding. And we burn it down. The bridge of the U.S. Valkyrie was silent. The echoes of the entity's last words still lingered in the air, as if the darkness of the abyss rift refused to let them go. Kane stood at the center, fists clenched, staring at the now empty view screen. The Nova judge had cut the transmission, but the weight of his final words remained. You do not understand what you have awakened, Admiral. But Kane did understand. Something ancient, something buried beneath layers of time and deception. The judges weren't just enforcers of galactic law. They were hiding something, running from something, and now it was awake. Sloane exhaled, still gripping the edges of her console. Sir, what the hell just happened? Rook swallowed. We just had a conversation with a god. Kane shook his head. Not a god. A survivor. Silence. Sloane looked at him. A survivor of what? Kane turned to her. That's what we're going to find out. He strode toward the command chair. Get me a full scan of the wreckage. Everything we pulled from the rift. Every signature, every anomaly. We're going to find something useful. Rook hesitated. Sir, if we do this, we're committing to something big. Bigger than anything we've ever faced. Kane didn't waver. We've already crossed the line. Rook. No turning back now. Sloane started pulling up the scans, her fingers flying over the console. "Sir, there's something strange." Kane turned to her. Define strange. She zoomed in on a particular section of the debris field. Among the countless wrecks, one object stood out. It wasn't broken. It wasn't covered in battle scars. It was intact. A single, massive structure, hidden among the graveyard of ships. Rook's eyes widened. "That's a station." Sloane nodded. "Not just any station. It's old. Older than anything I've ever seen." Kane's gaze hardened. "Can we board it?" Sloane hesitated. "It's pressurized. Still has power. But, sir, I don't think we're supposed to go in there." Kane smirked. "That just makes me want to go more." 30 minutes later, the docking clamps hissed as they latched onto the ancient station's airlock. The Valkyrie's boarding team, Kane, Sloane, Rook, and 3 armed Marines, stood in the dimly lit airlock, weapons at the ready. The door creaked open, revealing darkness beyond. A heavy, oppressive air seeped through, carrying the scent of dust and something else. Something unnatural. Kane stepped forward, his boots echoing in the silence. Inside, the station's corridors were lined with strange symbols. Carvings etched into the metal, glowing faintly as if alive. The deeper they went, the more they felt it, a presence. Something was watching. Sloane's voice was a whisper. "I don't like this." Rook checked his scanner. No life signs, but there's something ahead. A door stood at the end of the corridor. Unlike the others, this one wasn't just carved. It was sealed. Heavy locks held it in place, and at its center was a symbol. Kane reached out and touched it. The symbol lit up instantly. The station rumbled, and then the door opened. Beyond it was a chamber unlike anything they had ever seen. A massive hall, stretching far beyond what the station's exterior suggested was possible. Floating orbs of light hovered above, illuminating the walls, lined with thousands of stasis pods. And inside them, humans. The team froze. Sloane's breath caught. "Sir, that's impossible." Rook's hands were shaking. That's us." Kane's heart pounded. This station wasn't just a relic. It was a vault. And these people, whoever they were, had been locked away for thousands of years. Before anyone could react, a deep voice filled the chamber. Not from speakers, not from a machine, but from the very air itself. The last of the first men. Kane turned sharply. "Who said that?" The room shifted. Shadows moved, converging at the far end. From the darkness, something stepped forward. A figure, tall, cloaked in deep crimson robes, its face hidden behind an ornate mask. But its presence, it was old. Older than the judges, older than anything Kane had ever encountered. The figure stared at them. "You are not ready for the truth, Admiral Kane." Kane raised his weapon. "Try me." The figure didn't flinch. "Then listen well, and know that your war has only just begun." The chamber was silent. The cloaked figure stood at the far end, unmoving, watching Kane and his team with an air of expectation. The eerie glow of the stasis pods cast flickering shadows across the ancient walls, highlighting the thousands of preserved humans locked away in time. Kane's grip tightened around his weapon. His team stood frozen, hearts pounding, minds racing. Rook broke the silence first. "Who the hell are you?" The figure stepped forward, slow and deliberate, his crimson robe barely brushing the floor. The mask he wore, a dull, metallic gold with no visible eyes, gave no hint of expression, but his presence was overwhelming. "I am the Keeper." Kane took a step forward. "Keeper of what?" The voice was deep, resonant. "History, truth, that which was stolen." A chill ran through Kane. He gestured to the thousands of frozen humans around them. "These people, are they alive?" The Keeper's mask tilted slightly. "They sleep, as they have for millennia." Sloane exhaled sharply. "Millennia? That's not possible." The keeper ignored her, his attention fixed solely on Kane. "Do you understand what you stand in, Admiral?" Kane glanced around at the vast chamber, then back at the masked figure. An ancient station, a vault. The keeper nodded slowly. A tomb, and a warning. Kane's patience was wearing thin. Enough riddles. Who are these people? Why are they here? The keeper finally stepped closer. Because they are the first. Silence. Kane frowned. The first. What? The air felt heavier, as if the station itself was waiting for his reaction. The keeper's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of entire civilizations. The first humans. Kane's blood ran cold. Rook let out a shaky breath. That's impossible. The keeper turned his masked face toward him. You speak of what you have been told, not of what is true. The room seemed to darken as the keeper extended a hand toward the stasis pods. The symbols on the walls flared to life, casting moving patterns of golden light across the chamber. Long before your species crawled from the dirt of Earth, before the judges, before the Crimson Wars, humanity ruled the stars. Sloane shook her head. No, that doesn't make sense. Humanity's first spaceflight was barely a few centuries ago. The keeper's tone did not change. No, it was your second. Kane felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. He had heard stories of lost civilizations, of impossible ruins found on uninhabited worlds. But this is insane, Rook muttered. The keeper continued. These are the last of the first men. The final remnants of a war fought beyond time. The judges were not always rulers, Admiral. They were servants, once, until they betrayed their masters. Kane narrowed his eyes. Masters. The keeper finally came to a halt, standing mere feet from him. They were given power, and with it, they chose to rule. A deep hum rippled through the station, and for a split second, Kane saw it. A vision, not his own. A galaxy burning. Massive ships, unlike anything Kane had ever seen, locked in battle with towering godlike beings of pure energy. A great war, fought across stars. Entire civilizations turned to ashes in the void. And in the heart of it, humans, leading the charge. The vision ended as abruptly as it began. Kane staggered, gasping. His team rushed to him, but he held up a hand. Sloane's face was pale. Sir, what was that? Kane didn't answer. He turned back to the keeper. You're telling me humans once ruled the galaxy? The keeper inclined his head slightly. Yes, and your judges made sure you forgot. Kane's mind raced. If this was true, if humanity had been wiped from history, then what else had been hidden? The Nova judges weren't just rulers. They were usurpers. Rook swallowed. What do they want with this station? The keeper's voice was calm. To ensure the past remains buried. Sloane's fingers hovered over her rifle's trigger. So why haven't they already destroyed this place? The keeper's mask shifted slightly. Because they cannot. A deep rumbling shook the station. Kane's instincts screamed at him. What was that? The keeper tilted his head, as if listening. They are coming. The team tensed. Kane turned toward the exit. We need to get out of here. Now. The keeper remained still. You misunderstand, Admiral. There is no escape. Before Kane could respond, every console on the station flared to life. The air hummed with unseen energy, and the symbols on the walls began shifting, changing. Rook's scanner beeped wildly. Sir, there's a massive energy signature above us. Kane turned, looking up through the station's high ceiling. Through the thin metal panels, he saw it. A fleet. Not just any fleet. Judge dreadnoughts. Dozens of them. Sloane's voice was barely a whisper. They found us. Kane's pulse pounded. We need to move. Get back to the ship. The keeper raised a hand, and the doors slammed shut. No, Admiral Kane. It is time for you to remember. The station shuddered, And suddenly, Kane felt it. A force deep within the station, awakening. Something powerful. Something alive. And as the Nova Judge's fleet descended, as the abyss rumbled with the coming storm, Kane knew one thing for certain. This was no longer a battle. This was the beginning of a war.